All right. Thanks for coming out for Achieve Discipline. This has been interesting as far as some of the feedback that I've gotten just through private email. The number of people who are saying they need it, a lot of people who are saying, need that, but I think I really need goal setting. But really, discipline is what so many things hinge on. You know, our ability to do what we really need to do. Really having that desire and drive is not always enough. It's rare that we really have something that we never planned to do that we need discipline on. It's usually something that we actually had in mind at one time that we really wanted to do that. I think I used the example about going out and running. How we will set our gear out the night before. We've got good intentions. We feel great about it. We feel strong. And then the next morning, we get up and we're like, this is insane. You know what? I don't even want to do this. I don't even know why I'm doing this. I certainly do not want to get out there and run this morning. And so discipline is something that all of us have a challenge toward at times. All of us have to get focused on. And so as we cover this today, especially toward the end when we get to the quadrants, I think that's going to be especially useful. I've been using this in my own life to do things that I really didn't want to do, but I knew that I needed to do. Now, you've seen this about 100 times so far, that discipline is doing what you should do, when you should do it, whether you want to or not. Yeah, that's a powerful statement. That's something that you really need to memorize. And it's that type of firestone, as I talk about in the five stones, that type of firestone that's anchored within you. If you have that saying linked to something that is visual or something that is auditory, can cause you to do things that you normally would give up on, normally quit on. Now, part of the challenge with discipline that we don't talk about too much is that we feel like it's just a willpower thing. But the truth is, it's more than that, because all of us have had those times when things didn't go right and we went ahead and pushed through and we didn't get the result we wanted. And so we also have a string of failures that sometimes make us feel like, well, why in the world should I be disciplined if it's not going to turn out the way I want to anyway? We don't usually talk about that. We act like discipline is this big willpower thing and we're just a loser if we don't make it. And we've got all these negative connotations associated with it. But the truth is, we've got a string of successes. We've got a string of failures. Those are not in play. What we've got to do is what's important right now. Carrie, my best friend that a lot of you guys know, said this a while back on Facebook. She said, we can't live life in the past lane. And I thought, that's so true. Don't we do that? We look in the back, in the rearview mirror, or in the past, and we allow that to inhibit our future. So when it comes to discipline, we got to do what we really need to do, what we should do, when we should do it. And often that's now, or at least at a time that we've written down, and whether we want to or not. That's one of the biggest differences, is that most of us really want to do the things that we want when we want. And honestly, it's what we've been taught. We've been taught that doing business online, for example, is to give us this freedom to do what we want when we want, or that we should be able to make enough money to retire so that we get to do what we want when we want. And we demand a certain amount of service or a certain amount of expectation that we have in life for things to go our way. And so we really want to do what we want when we want, instead of saying, you know what, I don't want to do this right now. I may not even want to do this activity, but I've got to do it because it's what needs to be done. And now is the time to do that. And often we don't focus on that and we don't have that realization in our lives. So two enemies, and hopefully you downloaded the worksheet that was there on the same page as this registration. But if you didn't, it's all right. If you're watching this replay, it's right beneath this replay. And you can fill in these blanks later. If you didn't get that and you want to fill these blanks in just on a sheet of paper, do that. I think that it's important to write things down. I think that there is that mind-body connection that allows us to learn at a deeper level, to experience it at a deeper level, and certainly to remember it. And some sort of a physical writing down usually brings that about. So two enemies to us when it comes to self-discipline. Number one is least resistance. That we want to get to a certain destination as fast as possible and as easy as possible with as little work as possible. Now, this may be mainly American culture. I see it in other cultures, first world, that people have this expectation of being able to get as much as possible for nothing. It's like somebody coming to learn how to sell high ticket information. Let's say that you are learning how to sell something for $1,000 or $2,000 in your business, and we'll call this high ticket. And yet I run into people all the time that don't want to pay more than, say, $20, maximum $50 for something of that level. I want this return. I want this $1,000 return, or I want to make 10,000 off of this, or I want to make 100,000 off of this, but I don't want to give you that money. I want to give you as little as possible, and I want to receive as much as possible. Now think about that, the way things are sold just in general. If you'll take this pill, you'll lose weight as fast as possible, as much as possible, with you doing as little as possible. Or how about the advertisements that'll say you can lose 20 pounds in the next 30 days without changing one thing that you eat and without doing 1 minute of exercise. And obviously you guys are thinking that's insane. People buy that like crazy because it's least resistance. One of the things that is super popular right now is called manufactured celebrity. And that's where you do a press release and you end up getting on, say, Forbes and CNN and USA Today and stuff like that with a press release. But you get to use their logos, right? So you'll have, as seen on CNN. Technically, you weren't on CNN. You were on a press release page that CNN may have listed, right? But you weren't actually on CNN. But anybody who sees that CNN logo thinks you were on CNN. Or one of the other popular things that is taught nowadays is how to become an Amazon bestseller. This is just about past. This was really big about a year and a half ago. And that was that you went into Amazon and you found an underserved category, and then you would write a book for that underserved category, and it was super easy to get a bestseller out of it super quick because nobody else is selling books in that category right then. And so you got listed for a day as the bestseller of that category, but you didn't say it's bestseller of category 2083. You just said it's a bestseller, Amazon bestseller, which technically is true, but what does society believe? They're thinking New York Times bestseller. They're thinking big time, right? And so that's manufactured celebrity. It allows people to appear to have really accomplished something major when it was really something very small. See, that is what this least resistance path is about, is how can I get as much as possible with as little as possible? Now, there's times when that can be useful, and we should live like that. But most of the good things in life and most of the things that we're trying to achieve in our life, the path of least resistance is not going to be what works best. It's going to be the path, not necessarily of most resistance. It's just going to be a path of resistance. It's almost everything we do is going to be harder than we really thought it was going to be. Our mind envisioned this to be so simple and so easy, and we came up against this barrier, and we're like, what in the world's going on? I thought that I was going to have this done by today, and it's going to take me another 6 weeks. See, we weren't planning that way. Any of us who have owned an offline business, and I have, I'm telling you, I always estimated incorrectly. It always took more capital than I thought it was going to. And it always took more time than I thought it was going to. And it always required more customers than I thought it was going to. And that's just the way that we estimate. Because we don't necessarily know how much effort's going to be involved, we tend to estimate in that minimum. And now sometimes we'll even back up and say, I'm going to be conservative. I'm going to be conservative. And even if it takes me, twice as long, I'll still be satisfied. But the truth is, we've not faced the resistance yet, so we don't have an accurate measurement of the resistance. But the enemy is we want the least resistance. The second enemy is expediency, really meaning that I want it now. Now, that's closely associated with least resistance, but it's basically saying I want it now without having to pay the dues. I want it now because this is what's in my heart in this moment. This is what I want to pursue in this moment. And I see this constantly across every business that I've ever been involved in. When it came to fitness, when I owned my fitness center, everybody wanted to get in shape now. They wanted to change their body within days. They wanted to see those instant results. When I work with speakers, they want to know how before their next engagement, they cannot be nervous and have zero fear. You know, I'm expedient. I want it now. Online business. Almost every single person that I ask, what is your goal, who's new? Well, they'll say, I want to make 6 figures within 6 months. I really need to, but I'm willing for it to be a year. Listen, a year, 6 figures from nothing, without like massive capital outlay. But, you know, I don't have any money. I want to be able to do everything free, and I want to make 6 figures in a year. You know, that is still expediency. That's like rapid crazy. That's like I want to lose 50 pounds in a month, right? You know, it's this crazy level that we picture ourselves because we live in this society that says that we deserve everything now, so we should expect everything right now. So that type of shift has to take place in our mind so that we're not with these enemies that are telling us, hey, take the path of least resistance and expect it now. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't some things that are easy, and it doesn't mean that there aren't some things that are fast. There are. But when we are setting out for accomplishment, we need to be thinking about how tough it could be so that we will remain disciplined. We become undisciplined because it was harder and it wasn't as fast. And so it's easy to lose the discipline and fall back and quit or halt or just say we're going to take a little time off because it didn't go as good as we wanted. Herbert Gray says this: the successful are more concerned about pleasing results. The unsuccessful are more concerned about pleasing methods. Write that down. The successful are more concerned about pleasing results. What's the end game? What's the end goal? The unsuccessful are more concerned about pleasing methods. Now, let me talk about results just for a second. I'm not talking about necessarily the final result. You've heard me say before, and you've seen this on the Achieve page at times, that goals are the desired destination. Results are the actual destination. So let's say that I had a goal today of going out and running 3 miles, but I overestimated the physical condition that I was in. And I get out there and I make it a mile. The goal was 3. The result was 1. Well, I need to care about that result. I don't need to beat myself up and say, well, you know what? I didn't do 3, so that was worthless. Nope, I learned where my body is so that next time I can gauge more effectively and I can gauge more efficiently. So I'm concerned about the result. Now, was that a pleasing method? No, I guarantee you that if I thought I was going 3 and I had to give out at 1, I was not pleased at 1, and I'm sure I didn't like the way I felt at 1. But the unsuccessful are concerned about pleasing methods, that this feels good, that it feels right, that we're enjoying the process, instead of saying, you know what, I want to make sure that I'm calculating my results, I'm keeping up with those, that as they stack up, I'm learning what's effective and what's not effective, and I'm going to move forward from there. So that allows us to really stay focused and allows us to do the things that we really need to do. So before we get to these 3 requirements, first of all, I want to make sure that you can still hear me. Type in yes if you can still hear me. Make sure my internet has not gone out. Awesome. Thank you, Kim. Perfect, guys. Any questions or thoughts to add over anything that we've covered already? Any additional thoughts or questions? I think all of that is probably common sense, But sometimes just hearing that frame, we don't really think of ourselves having gone down that road with those two enemies, or we don't think about results. We think about the method a lot more. But if you have anything to add, go ahead and type that in real quick. All right, 3 requirements. Number 1, what is it that you want? If we're going to be disciplined, it begins with what we want. And we've got to be clear on that. Most of the time, we are broad, but we're not specific. So if I want to lose weight, why do I really want to lose weight? What's the reason for that? And I need to really be specific with it. So let's say that I want to lose 30 pounds so that I can play in the afternoon with my boys, especially when they were younger. You know, I want to play with them, but I get out there and I'm winded after 10 minutes. It's embarrassing. They want to invite their friends over. And so I don't simply want to lose 30 pounds. I want to lose 30 pounds so I can play with my kids and not embarrass them. So that's a lot more specific. I am a lot more apt to remain disciplined on a clear vision than an unclear vision. Because the truth is, I probably don't care if I lose the 30 pounds or not. But I do care if my kids are affected, right? That's a lot more specific. So sometimes we're very broad and we'll say this is the reason, but we don't narrow it down. In 5 Stones, I talk about the cornerstone, and this is our reason why. And some of you have heard this example a few weeks ago in another meeting. But I was sitting down with one of my clients, and we were talking about one of his goals that he's trying to accomplish at work. And I was asking him how it was going. And he said, well, on day 1, I accomplished it. On day 2, I didn't quite do it. On day 3, I just really failed. I said, well, why are you wanting to do this? And he said, well, I want to contact my clients. I want to build greater rapport. And I certainly want them to send me more business. I said, okay, well, that's a good why. And that's a really pretty why. As you told me that's super honorable. I'm proud of you. That's good. We could tell that to anybody and they would all feel good about it. So you want to make all these calls to do something really good and favorable. And nobody would be against that. I said, but what's your ugly why? And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, the ugly reason you're doing this, why you need to push through and you need to reach this goal. And he said, I don't know. I said, well, I think you do because we've just had evidence of it. And you've told me about it the last couple of weeks. And he said, what's that? I said, you need to accomplish this because you're a quitter. You quit all the time. Every time that we've met so far, you've not fully accomplished anything because you quit. And you've even mentioned that any goal that you went for before with your work, unless there was a hard, fast deadline, that you never accomplished it. I said, so the bottom line is that you really need to accomplish this. You want to accomplish this because you're a quitter. And he said, well, that's not very attractive. I said, that's why it's called the ugly. It's the ugly cornerstone. It's the ugly reason why. And so when we're listing our requirements of what we want that we've got to be disciplined for, yeah, list that good thing. Yeah, I want to get healthy so I can play with my boys. See, that's a pretty one, right? What's the ugly one? Because they won't invite their friends over because I embarrassed them. So we usually don't tell people that. If we were to go out and tell people I'm getting in shape because I want to play with my sons, it might be like, oh man, you're a great dad. If we said, hey, I want to get my shape because my boys are embarrassed about me and they want to invite their friends over. That's ugly, isn't it? So our ugly one we may not share. Our pretty one we are willing to share with the public, but our ugly one we may keep private. But that helps us become disciplined because we've got a real reason why we're doing this. Not all this fake mess that we tell ourselves, not all these lies that we tell ourselves, but something rock solid, and it's the dirt of the reason why we want to accomplish these things. So number 1 is you've got to make sure that you're super clear on what you want and why you want it. Number 2, to really be disciplined, you've got to know what it's going to cost. And everything's going to cost us something. To get up and exercise in the morning or to work on our business or to do whatever, if we get up earlier than normal, it's going to cost us sleep, right? It might actually cost us money. Some of the best advice that I ever got from my friend named John, who's a multi-millionaire. It was actually one of my buddies talking to him and said, John, I would love to invest in some of your properties. He said, well, how much money do you have? He said, I've got $100,000. He said, what's the first thing I need to do with it? He said, well, the first thing you need to know is that there's a pretty good chance you're going to lose $100,000. He said, well, I don't have $100,000 to lose. He said, well, don't invest it. I thought, well, that was pretty good, right? He had to count that cost. He had to be willing to put in the pot something he was willing to lose. Often when it comes to discipline, we don't actually want to pay the cost when we think it may not give us a return. We think that we may not get back. We might not get that money back. We may not get that weight loss. We may not get that website up. We may not achieve that goal. And so sometimes we give up because that cost seems to be so high. Realize that part of discipline is to know that the cost that we pay may not come back to us. Now, that's not super encouraging. That's not one of those messages that we hear and we go, wow, Paul, that's unbelievable. That was just like some of the best motivation ever. But most of us, we don't count the cost. We don't realize exactly how much it's going to be in time equity and sweat equity. And we do a lot of the spending that gets us ready to actually achieve the discipline. If somebody's beginning an online business, a lot of times they'll go out and furnish their home office. They'll get business cards. They'll get a brand new computer. They'll get a brand new printer. They'll do all this stuff. They'll buy courses, which the courses probably actually need. They'll spend a lot of money, but none of that required discipline. That really wasn't the cost. The cost starts being exercise when the rubber meets the road, and now I actually have to put forth that sweat equity. See, the truth is, everybody can buy a laptop if they got enough on their credit card. Everybody can go out and get a nice desk to put in their office. But not everybody will stay up till 1 trying to figure out how in the world to install WordPress through Fantastico. What happened? What's going on here? Now, I remember in the early days when I was learning HTML code, the cost was not the computer. The cost was all this gibberish that I could not figure out. That's when I had to really decide if I was going to be disciplined or not. And then number 3 is, am I going to pay the price? The cost is really an estimate. We don't really know how much it's going to cost until we actually get out there and do the road work, until we start eating those salads, and until we start putting together those products and trying to build that email list, until we actually do the thing that we planned. Then we've got to decide, you know what, I'm going to pay this no matter what. There's a thing in online business that is tossed around a lot called shiny object syndrome. And we'll say that that exists because we're seeking the next big thing. But I'm not so sure that it's not us simply trying to escape the current price that we're paying. Because right now it's hard. What we're trying to do right now is difficult. And so if I can go and pay money to try this next thing, maybe this next thing will work and I can quit all this hard stuff I'm doing right now, right? I think that's the way our mind works. It's not just that we're attracted to something new. It's that we get to escape the price we're having to pay right now and go and do something different. So those are the 3 requirements that we need to know exactly what we want and be clear about it. We've got to know the cost, and that's going to be an estimate, but I would estimate high. And then we've got to be willing to pay that price. And that's when we start doing what we should do, when we should do it, whether we want to or not. Grant Cardone says this, and this is on the second page of the handout if you're using it. Success is your duty, obligation, and responsibility. I love that saying. Now, I grew up in a very conservative faith where achievement and ambition and things like that weren't really frowned upon. You just didn't broadcast it. And I was really never told very much about success and about it being a duty, an obligation, and responsibility. And I didn't realize that until I started doing work in other countries for orphanages. And here's what I've noticed is that Delta or the Hyatt or the Hilton or Thrifty or any other car rental place, that none of those folks gave me anything free because I was helping with an orphanage. You're not even gonna believe this. When we go to build an orphanage, none of the construction workers say they're gonna work for free. The contractor in those lands don't say, hey, we'll just do it for free and we'll donate all of the materials. Why? Because they're running a business and it takes money. Nobody just donates all the food for free. It's somebody has to pay for it. So as we're successful, it's not a dirty word at all. It's our duty, our obligation, our responsibility to be successful. And so we become disciplined, not for our own gain exclusively, but for the gain of others. I think that we've each got that driver within us that causes us to go faster and causes us to go harder when the outcome is not simply feeding us, but it's feeding other people as well. I guarantee you that most of the things that you give up on and you're not disciplined on are things that are not necessarily going to impact somebody else negatively. You quit because it's going to affect you, but you just get to quit. Hey, when I'm going to the gym and my workout partner isn't there, the things going on in my head when he's not going to show up are totally different than things going on in my head when he does show up. If I'm like, Matt's not coming today, I don't know if I need to go. I'm not going to push myself as hard. It sure is a long way over there. You know what? I could do some stuff right here at the house. I don't even need to go to the gym. But if I know Matt's on his way, I can not want to go, but I'm like, Matt's going to be there. I'm going to have to go, right? You know, success, when it's based in other people's success as well, becomes even more our duty, our obligation, and our responsibility. All right. So up to this point, anything to add before we actually get to the quadrants? I think all of that information is necessary to help frame the quadrants that we're about to go through, because they're all prerequisites and we're going to see ourselves in these quadrants even more than we have. All right. I don't see anybody typing anything in. One more check on you can hear me. Type yes in the Q&A box. Perfect. All right, let's get to work. Make sure you've got a sheet of paper out right now, because this is not technically on the screen. I'm going to back out. I'm going to draw on the screen. It's going to take me just a second. Get my iPad up. So you should have your handout. We're going to talk about this quadrant. I'm going to build this out. And you can just write in what you need to. So if you're drawing that out, just put your little crosshairs there. Now, up at the top, I want you to write the word obligation. Down at the bottom, I want you to write the word optional. So we've got things that we're chasing, dreams that we're chasing, activities, tasks, goals. Some of these are obligations. We don't have a choice. Our choice is taken away from us. Somebody else has told us we've got to do this, period. On the opposite end of the spectrum are the things that are optional. We've decided these things. We've chosen these things ourselves. No one else told us that we had to do them. On the left-hand side, I want you to write the word fuel. And on the right-hand side, I want you to write the word fire. Fuel means that these are the things that we've got to get energized for, that we've got to get excited about, that somebody may have to feed us into this energy and this excitement. And if we have a low fuel, then it can be especially difficult to get some things finished, right? So let's start with this top left quadrant. These are things that are our obligation, and we might have low fuel for them. Most people, not everybody, but most people put their job in this category. They've got low fuel. They're not excited about it, but they've got high obligation. They don't have a choice. They're just going to have to go, period. And if they don't go, guess what? They don't get paid. The things in this category, unless you absolutely quit, these things get done. The obligation, even with low excitement level, tend to get done because we have to. We've all shown up for work that we did not want to do. We've all done somebody a favor that we didn't want to do. We've all had a friend call us to help them move, and we did not want to help them move, but we did it because we felt obligated because they helped us move at some point. So we were not excited. Our fuel level was extremely low. We might have been on empty, but we're obligated to do it, and so we get it done. Now, I want you to think for a few minutes some things that maybe you're obligated to do that you do anyway because you don't have a choice in the matter. Think about a few of those things. I'm going to pull up the Q&A area for me to look at. Jennifer says, do you think that discipline is tied to motivation? Not necessarily, not in the motivation that we think about, that I'm motivated. And we usually think motivated means I'm excited. But you think about work. We may be motivated by the paycheck. We're not excited about it, but we're motivated because we feel like we've got to get it done. So that may be a negative motivation, and we do it anyway. Type in some of the things that you think about that are obligations that you may not necessarily want to do. All right, Kim says clean house. It's an obligation. Doesn't necessarily want to do it, but she does it. What are some other things? Type those in. Pay the mortgage. Good one, Katrina. No doubt. Pay the mortgage. I don't want to do it. Hey, I don't want to. There can be plenty of money in my account, but I don't have the best attitude about paying bills. Cutting the grass. Yep. It's an obligation. Not necessarily exciting, but you do it anyway. Y'all type some more in, guys. We've got a lot on here and very little typing. That could be one of the reasons we are undisciplined. We can't even do an exercise on a webinar. Obligations. Things you have to do, and you may not be excited about them. Anything else? All right, that seems to be it. Super interesting. I'm super interested that there were not more typed in than that. Let's see. Here comes one more. Getting up in the morning and all sorts of chores. All right. Kim says cooking. I get that. And driving. Okay, good. A little bit of a spurt there at the end. That was pretty good. Now let's look at the adjacent quadrant. So we're going to look down at the bottom right. Now, these are things that are optional, but we are on fire for them. We're actually excited about these. They weren't told to us to have to do. We've chosen to do these things, and we're excited about doing these things. Now, these are the things that are fun. So top left is done. We're going to get it done. And the bottom right is fun. We're excited about doing these things. So type in some things that you are excited about doing. All right, Drew says golf. I love it. So that was a fast response. That was way faster than fuel and obligation. Going to horse shows, Kim. Gardening, Stephen. Good. Katrina, listening to great speakers. She said like me. Good, Katrina. That was nice. Good move. What else? Dancing, hanging with the family, travel. Love it. All right, good answers, guys. So think about that. Those are things that, okay, going to the playground with my kids, those are things that are fun for us. So the discipline is really not needed as much here because we're excited about it, because it's fun for us. And so if those are things that we want to do, and Kim wants to go to a horse show, nobody's got to twist her arm. Probably don't even have to set an alarm for it. She's fired up about it. She's excited about it. On the opposite side, if the horse shows were mandatory and she wasn't excited about it, it would still get done. It wouldn't be fun, but it would get done. All right, so bottom left. Low fuel and it's optional. Low fuel and it's optional. What we tend to do here is this is what we tend to skip. We skip these things because we don't have to do these things. They're not an obligation. We chose them. We might have even thought they were fun at one time, but then suddenly it moves over here to the low fuel. It's not fun anymore. I'm not fired up about it anymore. And so I start skipping it. So day one of the gym, got me a trainer, pretty excited about it. It's fun. Got my new workout gear on. Got me some new armbands. Got a headband on. It's getting crazy. First week in the books. Second week in the books. Third week, somebody's invited me to a buffet. I go to the buffet and I lose control. Get up the next morning, I feel kind of bad, but I go and work out anyway, but I'm kind of sick. Workout doesn't go good. I can't lift as much. I'm kind of discouraged. The next workout just happens to coincide with the worst weather of the year. And so I decide I'm not going that day. Then it's the weekend. Hang out all weekend, do whatever I want. Stuff that is fun, even though it's optional. Comes Monday, and I'm not excited about working out at all. In fact, I don't want to. And I really don't have to because nobody's making me. And so I decide, you know what, I'm going to skip today. Now I'm going to go back tomorrow, or I'll go back Wednesday. I'm going to skip today. All right, so this is where our biggest discipline problem exists, is when we've got low fuel and it's optional. And the truth is that we can have a discipline problem from about right here, right here back. Usually when we're really hot for something, we don't have a discipline problem at all. Drew mentioned golf. I skipped a lot of my first 2 years of college because they didn't require attendance. You just have to show up on test day. And I played golf every single day from like 8 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon. It was like my job. And nobody had to force me to do that. Nobody. Now, I don't play as much as I do anymore, as I used to. I don't play that much anymore. And so I can easily skip. I'm excited about the thought, but it's optional. And I know I'm not going to play as well as I used to. And so that's going to really come in and affect me. You know, I'm going to be able to see that big turnaround. All right, Katrina says that she lost audio. Can anybody else hear me? Just type yes if you can. Okay, good. All right. Good. Thanks, guys. So when we look at this, you know, this is our biggest problem. Our fuel is low and it's optional. And we probably have not framed it this way before because your fuel is not linked to your intentions. Our intentions are very good most of the time. So we've got good intentions and we even feel like we should do this thing, but deep down we don't have that fuel and that excitement that is pushing us forward. So that the night before, when we're getting ready to go out and run, for example, we've got really good intentions and we may actually be pretty excited about it. But the next morning, because we're tired and maybe we're weak and maybe we're groggy, and maybe the weather's bad, and maybe we slept a little bit too long, and maybe we're stiff, and maybe we're hungry. We still had good intentions, but our fuel is really, really, really low. And so we skip it. So when your fuel's low and it's optional, I think if you start tracking your times of lowest discipline, I think that you're going to find out that most of it is in this quadrant. That it's something that's optional, that if you don't get it done, it's not going to matter. All right, so let's even take something like this webinar. Why do you think that I do a lot of live training? Because if I've just got to record it, and if I didn't tell anybody, if I said, hey, it'll be out this month, when do you think that Paul Evans might get it done? He might wait to the end of the month. I know you probably think, oh, Paul would do it on July 1. Nope, not necessarily. I would wait until it felt good and it was fun. I would wait until that inspiration hit, right? But you know what? I announced over and over again, even with internet scares, that we were going to do this webinar today at 3. So I ended up shifting from optional to obligation. So let's talk about that, because I think that's one of the biggest keys to becoming highly disciplined, is how do we move the optional to the obligation? So the obligation looks like this. So we look up here at the top. Let me see. Let me use blue. That'll keep us a little bit different from these other areas. Shade us a little bit different. So when we get up here, this is when we ship. This is when we get it done, because it is an obligation, but we also have some high fuel and high fire for it. So we're excited about it because we have a very precise reason to be excited. And we also have an obligation because it's necessary. All right, so we've got to do work to be able to ship the things that we skip. How do we move from skipping to shipping? How do we move there? So I mentioned with this webinar that I moved from optional to obligation by stating a time, by allowing other people to know about it, right? So the consequence, if I just not shown up today because I just didn't feel like it, and I've got a program called Achieve, I'm not sure that that's the best example. I'm not sure that you guys would be pumped about learning any sort of achievement from me if everything was optional and I started skipping stuff. So I moved it from optional to obligation. I moved it from making sure it was something not just that I wanted to do, but something that I really had to do. So I moved it up there by stating that date. Now let's go back to that early example of, say, I'm getting in shape for my kids. It's optional, and I may not even be excited about it. But let's say I started telling my boys, hey, daddy's getting in shape so he can play with you more. What do you think they're going to do? If I don't go out and run, they're going to say, Daddy, we thought you were getting in shape to play with us more. Daddy, why are you eating that 16th donut? We thought you were getting in shape to play with us more. You know what? They're going to start calling me on it. So one of the biggest ways that we can do that is make sure that there is an accountability factor that moves us into obligation. So my buddy that I told you about that I was meeting with, that wouldn't keep reaching his goals. And I told him that, he needed to do it because he was quitting. He said, well, okay, I'm going to do it next week. I'm not going to be a quitter. I said, that's cool. And if you don't do it, you can just pay me $100, extra. As he said, well, I don't know if that's really fair. I said, well, then that's where you've gotten mistaken, because this isn't about it being fair. It's not about whether or not you like how we got there. There needs to be a consequence and there needs to be a result if we don't get this thing done. Most of the time, I think you'll see that when there's low fuel and it's optional, where we're skipping stuff, then the consequence is not really major. Okay, we're disappointed. We feel like we let ourselves down a little bit, but it's not enough pain to switch it into something different, right? So we've got to figure out if we need a consequence, if we need an assessment, a new assessment or new accountability to be able to move into that. So we start keeping track of things. We start moving things along. Now, our fuel may not necessarily get over here, but if we can just cross the line a little bit, if we can have, Jennifer, that motivation, that positive motivation for doing this, then we're going to ship it. So let's use another example. Let's say that I decide that I'm going to write a book. And in the beginning, I guarantee I'm fired up, but it's optional. And it starts out as fun. But about 3 chapters deep, it's not that fun. And it still is optional. And my fuel begins to wane. And I don't want to do it anymore. And suddenly I can quit and it really doesn't matter. And let's say that nobody else even cares in my family if I write this book or not. In fact, they're making fun of me for writing the book. But let's say that I'm convinced that this book is going to make a difference. Let's say that I know that if I don't release this book, that there are going to be 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, 10,000 people whose lives are not going to be changed because I sat on my duff instead of getting the work done. And so no longer am I costing myself something. I'm now costing someone else something. They're not going to get the impact. They're not going to get the change. So there's 3 elements right there of moving from optional to obligation. Number 1 is that we just announce it and we put ourselves on the line for it. Number 2 is that we've got accountability and it's going to cost us something if we don't accomplish it. And number 3, if we don't do it, it's going to cost somebody else something. You know, that kind of goes into that level of doing something with my boys, that it's going to cost them fun. Maybe it costs me a little bit of embarrassment right now, but it's going to cost them fun if I don't get it done, right? If I don't ship it. So we see that movement. All right. So hopefully all of that is clear. And before we move into the next pictures that you have on your worksheet, is there any questions about anything that I covered? Does this illuminate anything? Does this make sense to you? Do you see yourself in this scratchy drawing? You know, does this bring any sort of clarity to when it comes to discipline? Why you get some things done and why you don't get other things done? Yeah, Drew says it's great stuff, really helps clear things up. Kim says really gave her some clarity as well. Good. So the things that you're not accomplishing right now, that you're quitting on, I would encourage you to redraw this and to find out where you are. You know, assess your energy from fuel to fire. Assess whether it's optional and obligation. And start pinpointing why you're losing the discipline on it. Most of us don't do this. We just think if I just had willpower, I'd get it done. It's not true, because if we don't really have that reason to get it done, and it's really optional and we're not excited about it, we're just not going to finish it. So we've got to move things into obligation. All right. So you have a little image on the next page that looks like this, which obviously is going to be fire. Now I want you to write in the middle something that you've been quitting on, that you've not been having discipline about. Jennifer says, as you write that down, Jennifer says, could setting goals important toward this journey of discipline? This is because you want to make sure that you get things done. I think setting goals has something to do with it. Everything that we're doing discipline-wise may not necessarily be goal-related. It may be things like I was mentioning before that are obligation. I might work a certain job and I don't have necessarily goal about it. I just got to do it. My goal may be to pay the bills. But usually that's not very sexy, right? And so what we've got to do is if we're setting goals towards something that's going to make a difference or we're going to stay with long term, it can be totally different. Okay, good, Jennifer. All right, so one person, I'm not going to mention names just in case they don't want me to mention it, but let's say that there's a book, and let's use this as an example. Say this is something that I've done, or in the past, I've said this is something I've wanted to do. So it's optional, right? Unless I've got a contract with a publishing company, it's optional, right? Now, if I've signed a contract and they paid me in advance, my options are starting to be taken away, which could be a good idea. So here's what I want you guys to do. I want you to type in, if you were going to write a book that's totally optional and you had a medium fuel about it, but not necessarily on fire, but you wanted to move it into the middle right there. What are some things that you would do? What are some things that you think would help you make this book not optional, but an obligation? What are some things that could take place or something that you could do to make this an obligation? Type those in. All right, consider who will be served and that they won't be served if you don't do it. So audience impact. If you don't release the book, lives are going to go unserved. All right, another focus on the readers who need it. Let me talk about need for just a second. The truth is that there could be bad information out there. And if you don't make a correction, that there needs to be new information or else people are being misled. That'll move you from optional to obligation pretty quick. Sketch a detailed profile of the prospective reader and really see them and how it will affect them. I love that picture. All right. Or we call this in business sometimes an avatar. So this is a person you're writing for. So let's say that I was writing for Katrina. And as I wrote this book, I envisioned her reading it, taking the steps necessary, or if it was a novel, enjoying the story and feeling relaxed and uplifted. All right, so that is a different motivation, right? I will be letting Katrina down if I don't do this. Bet a friend $100. This is from Guy. Guy, let's say 1,000. Man, a lot of us get motivated in a heartbeat if we were, $100, we might go, oh man, $100, I can borrow that from somebody and pay this guy off. But if it was $1,000, I couldn't go to my mom and say, Mom, I didn't write a book. I owe this guy $1,000. Can I get it? She'd be going, you're crazy. All right, how this will add to the legacy. And books really can, because these can be long-term impact. What else? What would you buy or do with the income that you generate? A family trip to Disney. Okay, this is a good example. So I'm going to put Disney down. And if it's a family trip, then you announce it to the family that when you get this done, there'll be a family trip. I'll give you an example again from Carrie. I know that if you're on some of her webinars, you hear about me some, and I talk about her some, so hopefully that doesn't get on y'all's nerves too much. But when she first started in online business, she needed extra time to work her business. She knew she was going to be away from her kids more, even though she was working from home. So she ordered a DVD from Disney about a particular tour or adventure. And every day they would watch that DVD once or twice a day. It was only about 10 minutes. And she would remind her kids the reason that mommy's not going to be available over the next 8 weeks is because I've got to make the money for us to go on this trip. And so if you guys will give me the space that I need and the quiet that I need to work over the next 8 weeks, I'm going to take you to Disney. You think her kids protected her time? You think her kids made sure that mommy had time to work? You know they did. They wanted to go to Disney. So that's a great, great example. And what would have happened if she had quit working? Talk about the negative impact that would be real. Her kids going, yeah, mommy, you said you were going to take us and you didn't. So that's scary. That's scary to put that out there on the line, but it could really make a difference, right? Okay, so I'm going to scroll back up to some of these that were mentioned before, and let's work through those as well. Okay, so someone says, making my business profitable. It's a little fire. So making the business profitable. So one of the things that's a little bit different here is you've got to start thinking about, why am I not profitable? Why am I undisciplined? And most of the time, what I've seen with online business people especially is that there are so many options. There's so many things I could be doing. And instead, one of the ways to become profitable in business is to become a minimalist, is to say, I'm going to do this one offer and I'm going to do it really well. I'm not going to have 50 offers. I'm going to concentrate on what I know will work, and I won't try to do everything under the sun. I won't keep experimenting, but I will decide on something, and that's what I'm going to do, right? So profit now becomes more of an obligation because you're making yourself, let's say, a promise as well. So what are some other things, guys, that could be done to move a business into profit? And let's say that this business, it is optional, that if it closes down tomorrow, the family is not necessarily hurt. I'm not saying that's true in this case. I'm just saying that how would I move it from optional to an obligation? What are some things that I could do? All right. Not getting a lot of typing on that. Let me give you an example on this. Y'all may be typing in actually, but let me give you an example on this. So let's say that I wanted just to make a profit. I don't necessarily have a goal, but I have a tendency to quit. I've got a tendency to be undisciplined about releasing products or getting some things done in my business. So let's say what I decide is that I'm just going to announce a webinar. I'm going to host a webinar next week. It's going to be $20. Now, let's say that I've been reluctant to do a webinar. I've been reluctant to release a product. Well, now I've just announced it to my list. My options have now been taken away. Just like I mentioned about this webinar today, my options are taken away. I've got to get out there and do it. It may just be $20, but that $20, if I just sell one, that $20 that I made move me into profit. Let's say it take me an hour to plan it and an hour to host it. And let's say I only made $20. I've really made more than $20 because I've crossed a threshold. And let's say that I've been fearful about hosting the webinar. So I'm not as excited about it, but it went okay. And that one person got really pumped about it. What happens over here? Man, I start getting more and more on fire about it because it went good. I'll start obligating myself to more because it went well. Somebody else had this idea. I like it. From the profit, you could give to others to help them out. So you say, I'm going to donate of this first webinar. I need to do percentage. I'm going to donate 50%. And let's say you make $20, you give 10 away. I think that's pretty cool, right? So we've taken something that is an optional element I need to make a profit, but I hadn't pushed myself hard enough to making it an obligation. I've announced I'm hosting a webinar and I'm charging for it. And I don't back up and go, well, maybe I should give them something free first. Give them something free. Maybe they'll want to come to my paid webinar. Nope. You announce the webinar, you make them pay. Period. That'll move you into profit. Well, what if nobody pays, Paul? Well, you didn't already plan out the webinar, so you're all right. You didn't have extra effort. And you at least learned whether they would respond or not. All right. Okay, so last one. Somebody said I need to release my newsletter. All right, so this is something that's totally optional. I'm going to make this one just super easy. Newsletter is not being released regularly. The question on something like this, to me, the reason this one's more easy is because what we can do is use reputation. Now, this is an example, and I'm not telling you to do it this much. But if I was to email my list and say, you can expect to hear from me 3 times a week. Every single week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm going to email you. Here's what Monday's going to be about. Here's what Wednesday's going to be about. Here's what Friday's going to be about. You do that for 2 or 3 weeks, and then you quit doing it, you become a liar. And they'll call you on it. Folks will be like, are you sick? No, I just quit. I was just crazy. What? All right, so that's pretty tough, right? Now, you won't always be fired up about it, but it will make it a high obligation, and it will get done. So you will have the true definition of self-discipline. You'll be doing what you need to do, when you need to do it, whether you want to or not. So you make an announcement to your list of how often you're going to mail them, and they'll come to expect that. So that's kind of an easy example, and I really wouldn't use more to it than that. I'd keep it super tight. All right, any questions about anything that we've covered today, guys? Anything that you want me to hit on again? Anything that was unclear? I think the process, from what you guys are saying, has clarified some things, and I think this exercise, if you'll go do it with the things that you've been stuck on, or right after you get stuck, if you'll come do this exercise. You'll draw the quadrants. You'll find out where you are. You'll find your measurement on optional to obligation. You'll find your measurement on fuel to fire. And you'll find out if it's done, if it's fun, if it's skip, if it's ship. Find out where you are and then try to move these things as much as possible into this quadrant or into the done quadrant. The fun quadrant is what we're taught that our life is supposed to be. That's unrealistic. Keep doing the fun stuff, but even some of the fun things, I would try to move into obligations as much as I could, because often the fun things end up moving over into the skip things. All right. All right, good, guys. Let's see. What was the third requirement? Katrina says, the third requirement was actually paying the price. So the first of the 3 requirements was, what is it that you want? And then I was saying about that there needs to be that clarity of the reason why, the pretty why, and also the ugly why. The second one was cost. And then the third was paying the price. You've actually got to pay. You got to get out there and do the work, push it hard, excel. All right, guys. Well, thanks for coming out today. I'll get this replay up here in just a little bit if you want to review it. Email me any of your aha moments, paul@paulbevans.com, or put them in the Achieve section of Facebook. Get a little feedback on that. Katrina says, thanks. You're welcome, Katrina. Kim says, thanks. Awesome. Glad you guys came out today. And we will get this up to you guys pretty soon. And I'll get you an email out about it tonight. And I'll post the link in Facebook as well. Cool, Patty. Awesome. Good, Stevie. Thank you so much. Good times. All right. As always, success is not an accident. Be blessed.